Yes, yes, for life.
Welcome everyone to not only our Thursday, January 9th, 2025 meeting, but also our annual meeting. And I just wanted to point out that as our CEO has reported, our chairman is under the weather today. Nick, I don't know if he's here, but we wish you well. And whatever your shoe size is, I know that it's larger than mine, so I have to fill in the difference in shoe size. I guess we'll have a roll call. Members are, and Nick is not here. I think I'm here. Allison Walsh. Sarah.
Here.
Alejandro.
Present.
So you come in.
Thank you.
You're cold, I know.
I'm so
We're
glad.
good. Jasmine just gave us a great report on governance. Thank you very much. And Danielle, St. Rose, local neighbor, keeping a watch on everything. Thank you. Everything's okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I guess we will, everyone has obviously read the minutes of our last meeting, December 23rd, 2024. If there are any comments, please make note. If not, I will ask for a vote on approval of those minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any comments? If not, any abstain? Okay, minutes are approved. We have the governance report. Now it's our CFO report.
Well, I think we have to report, the governance committee's got to report, and then the board has got to approve those same resolutions on the recommendation.
The governance committee met on Thursday, January 9th at 10 a.m. We have recommended the adoption of the following resolutions: 2025-01-01 regarding the appointment of board officers, 2025-01-02 regarding annual policy review, and then resolution 2025-01-03 regarding the mission statement and 2025 performance goals.
Great, so resolution 25-0101 recognizes that the governance committee has recommended the following slate of officers: Dominic Mazz as chairperson, vice chairperson John Nigro, secretary Allison Walsh, treasurer Sarah Riccinelli, assistant secretary Danielle Melendez, and then assistant treasurer Alejandra Polino. Hearing no other nominations or offers, I'm going to offer this as a unanimously approved slate. If we could get a first and a second, and that will recognize these are the officers that have been appointed by the board. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. The next one is review and approval of our procurement policy, the acquisition and disposition of of property policies, and then the investment policies. So this has been reviewed at the governance committee. Additionally, staff and council has looked at these policies, recommend no changes at this point. So this resolution is for the board to approve these policies for this year. So we can get first. Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. And then the third resolution in your packet you'll see is the adoption of the authority mission statement and performance measures report. It has been modified. It's recommended by the governance committee, and it's been modified to add in the piece that this authority is, part of its purpose is to repurpose and sell and dispose of the St. Rose property. So with that modification, we're looking for a motion to accept and approve the mission statement. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. That's all I've got.
Okay, can we move now to the CFO's report?
Good morning, everyone.
Are we afloat?
I'm sorry?
Are we afloat?
Well,
We're
not trying
as good this month as we were last
Right.
month. Maybe?
Yep.
Put it that way. That's right. That's great.
So as Tom had mentioned in the governance meeting, we have been in contact with the ABO as to our reporting requirements for 2024. They do not have an answer for us yet. It is in the hands of the legal department of the OSC. So we are still waiting instruction on whether or not we have to report the annual report and budget for 2024.
You know, the issue here that, you know, the authority really hasn't done much. You know, we did make a bid and were accepted, but, you know, operationally, we have no funds. You know, there's no expenses to report. So, but if I had to guess, I would suggest that, you know, they're gonna want us to do something. And you'll understand why I feel that way a little bit later.
Yeah.
That's why Kevin Testo is on the phone.
Yes. Moving on to the operating budget update. The operating budget has, we haven't made any changes to it yet. It's still at the 5.5 million for 3 years. However, in the very near future, we will be scheduling weekly meetings with St. Rose to discuss the operating expenses and, you know, any changes that we can make.
And that, there will be changes, you know, because as we get further into this, you know, and really get down into the weeds, we'll figure out, one example is they have a series of operating contracts for anything from landscaping to IT to various maintenance contracts. And, we are gonna wanna take a look at all of those and figure out which ones we wanna, assume or renew and which ones we don't. So I think there's gonna be a refinement to our operating budget. I don't expect big movements, although there might be, but it will change. There will be some refinement and more granular detail in numbers.
And next up, we have Kevin Testo from Bonadeo, who's joining us remotely.
Well, why don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Yeah, why don't you, hang on a second, Amy, why don't you just
Yeah,
tell them
so
why we.
in preparation of hearing back from the ABO and their final determination, we thought it would be best to go ahead and engage Bonadeo for audit services for 2024.
Well, didn't we get some indication
Yeah.
from?
As Kevin has talked about, the issue for us is we have a partial year. I've been involved with a number of authorities that are started at some point during the year. I've been involved in authorities where the authority budget office has said, you know what, since you didn't have activity or substantial activity in the partial year, start with the reporting the following year. We don't have that answer. It is likely, it is possible, as Kevin has said, that they may come back and say, you have to start in March. So in order to be ready to start in March, which means you've got to file all of your annual report and audit report, which the independent audit is a big part of your annual report. So in order to do that, we reached out to the auditor, Kevin here, Bonadeo Group, who also does the audit for the Alliance. The reason being is the Alliance is staffing this entity. So he's very familiar with the record keeping and books and things like that. But we don't have any money yet. So I'm not sure what the answer is going to be from the ABO, but we're going to be ready one way or another. So that's the purpose of ultimately what you see this resolution number 4 is to authorize Kevin to retain an independent auditor for an audit of 24. So that's it.
So, Tom,
Yes.
I think I understand this, but, so we have no money as an agent, as an authority, but we've been spending money, the Alliance has been spending money to get us to where we are today, and will continue until we're funded. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does that have to be on the record somewhere?
Yeah,
It will be.
it's being recorded now. So
Yeah.
we do have payables that we're going to have to pay.
That will be part of the audit on,
Yeah, we've had legal
probably the only
fees
thing on the
and
financial
whatever
statements.
Yeah, and we've executed a services agreement with the Alliance. The board authorized that.
Right.
So those costs are accrued. Yes.
So I'll go to Kevin Testo and he
else.
can.
Just one other question.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And that was a great.
Hey,
read
Kevin,
of
Kevin, hang on one second.
What, one second.
We have, insurance?
Yes,
Yes, okay, that's been funded by,
that's been paid by the Alliance.
thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. This is exactly what we talked about this week. Tom summarized it very well. It would be a very interesting audit, and I just wanted to talk just a little bit about the differences that you may see if you sit on the Alliance board. we would prepare financial statements for the time period, September 12th through December 31st, 2024. That's what the first year set of financial statements would look like. It is very common, they are out there, where there are financial statements posted to the ABO's website that has zero activity. So we originally thought there would be zero activity, but as you just heard, I would agree that likely there will be an accrual at the end of the year, so liability and expenses. So it wouldn't be zero activity. But what the statements look like, they're a little different in terms of the fact that they are reported under government auditing standards, not FASB, which is what the Alliance follows because they are a 501c type of organization. In those financial statements, because it's under government auditing standards, we not only issue an opinion on the financial statement numbers themselves, but also on internal controls. So you may have heard the term yellow book. This would be a yellow book audit where we're required to understand and test controls with hopefully issuing clean and a clean opinion on whether there are proper controls around financial reporting. So even though there are is limited activity, there's additional, unfortunately, additional procedures that we as auditors have to perform. There's also what's called an MD&A, Management Discussion and Analysis, that gets included in your report. This is something that management writes, it's not audited, but it's included as the first page of your financial statements, essentially telling the reader what's happened. It's really like a prelim analytic saying what happened during the year and what is expected to occur over the next 12 months. So, at the end of the day, the financial statements may be 12 pages long with limited activity, but there is certain procedures that we do have to perform.
I should have asked this question, same kind of question. At the end of the day, does the bonding reimburse the authority for those funds? That's the plan. That's the plan.
So I agree with Tom, not that I want to, do anything that's unnecessary, but there is a risk that come February, they say, oh, you need the audit, and starting it in end of February wouldn't give us enough time to get it in by the March deadline.
I would just add to all this that, as we sit here and talk about this stuff, we don't think about it in these terms, but this is a very high visibility entity. It's a state public authority. We just bid on and successfully bid on a high visibility piece of real estate, the closed campus of the College of St. Rose. So I think that, the judgment of Amy, Tom, and Kevin is probably correct, that if the ABO is asked, hey, you want an audit of this or not, that it's probably going to be an affirmative response back just because of the importance and the level of, visibility and so on and so forth. So.
All right. So that's it for me for now. I would anticipate starting the work in the next few weeks so that we're prepared to report back to this board in the March timeframe.
So now we need a resolution.
So resolution 25-1-4 is in your packet, and it basically provides pursuant to both our NABIN legislation and the Public Authorities Law and our procurement policy. It provides basically the background and the authority and the process for retaining an independent auditor. And then this resolution would authorize the CEO to prepare, negotiate, execute any and all documents necessary to procure those services. So that's the resolution before it. To be first, second, and then we can vote on.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Talk
Kevin.
soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
For Kevin, on board?
Okay, good morning, everybody. I do want to point out, we have some guests with us this morning. Maybe if we could start down at the end with Jeff, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yes, Jeff Raddick, Director of Public Affairs, Baker Public Relations.
Dylan.
Jeff Cohen, Piper Sandler.
Eric Galinsky, Piper Sandler.
John Wallner, Pine Hills resident.
Dave Riley, Oakland County.
Joe Scott, good morning, everybody. Partner Hudson Russ, your bond counsel.
Thank you. And again, just to remind everybody, we are live streaming and this is a recorded conversation. So just an update on the bond underwriting. As you know, we sent out an RFP. You authorized us to send out an RFP. We did that. We got, I believe, 7 responses back. We had an outside staff plus outside review committee reviewed the RFPs, and we came up with a unanimous decision to select Piper Sandler to do the underwriting on the bond. And with that, I'll turn this over to Jeff Cohen to walk through this with support of our bond counsel, Joe Scott, to answer any questions you may have about this. You know, there's a lot of pressure to get this done quickly, and this is not a process that's easily accelerated, but our underwriting team has pledged that they'll do their darndest to help do that. So Jeff, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. So as Kevin said, the board hired Piper Sandler to be the investment banker or underwriter on the transaction. And what Kevin asked that I do today is give a very brief overview, a little bit of who we are, and then B, the process, how we're gonna get from here to there. And the real goal here is to get the proceeds from the bond market to be able to execute the purchase and sale agreement and fund their security and maintenance and all of those things. Piper Sandler, we're 125 years old. We're a public company. We're a large company. We're headquartered in Minneapolis, and we have an office here in Albany. I've worked in Albany as a public finance tax-exempt banker for over 35 years. So the local dynamic of all different types of credits, I've done quite a bit. As it relates to the financing, you know, as a public authority, you have the ability to issue debt on a tax-exempt basis. Simply means that the interest rate that you'll pay to investors will be lower because those investors don't need to pay tax on it. So that's the whole goal. There's still a lot of tax work that needs to be done. It's not done by us, it's done by bond counsel, and that's well underway. But, you know, from our point of view, the tax exempt financing makes tremendous sense. The plan of finance that we've preliminary discussed with Kevin and with the working group, the attorneys and whatnot, is to solicit interest bids, you know, what we call a request for terms from about 40 different banks. These are banks that will lend in the tax exempt market and in our preliminary review would be interested. What we're starting with is a very, very strong credit. It's a strong credit because at the end of the day, the primary or almost exclusive security for the bonds is going to be the financing agreement. That's a financing agreement which the county legislature has already authorized. And at the end of the day, the county is rated AA by the rating agencies. So that financing agreement is coming from a very, very strong entity that will provide a lot of interest, a lot of appeal to potential bond investors. The amount that we're going to borrow is going to be as little as possible to achieve a few goals. The $35 million under the purchase and sale agreement, a certain amount of funding for security and maintenance of the buildings prior to them being sold or being transferred, a certain amount of operational expense of the alliance, running the authority. All of those things, we're going to work up a budget. We're going to always, you know, we don't want to spend anybody's money, especially the counties. And we're going to have that, the bare minimum that we can borrow to achieve all of those goals. The other things that will be included in it is the fees and expenses. So the authority does not have to pay anything out of pocket. 100% of the costs of the goals, the
purchase, the maintenance, the fees and expenses will all be capitalized and financed. And then the real goal, our goal, what we're tasked with, is lower the debt service, lower the interest expense, and another important piece is make sure that when the real estate is sold, there's a mechanism that we can take the sale proceeds from the sale and pay down the bonds. Because there's no reason, there's no logical reason to have the bonds outstanding after we sold a property or properties. And that adds a little bit of, I wouldn't use the word complexity, but a little bit of nuance. You know, we don't want to have our hands tied of, if Kevin has an opportunity to sell one parcel or 3 parcels or 5 parcels, to be able to do that and pay down the bonds quickly. So that's a little bit of an overview. My colleague here, Eric, will walk us through a little bit of the timeline. And as Kevin said, the timeline is a little bit compressed, and it's just the way that our industry works. It's hard to speed things up. We are doing everything we possibly can. We met with the working group Friday. We're meeting with them, on a work session basis once a week, and we're going to push as hard as we possibly can to meet the deadline. Eric, a little bit on some of the steps that we need to take.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Eric Linsky. I'm the managing director with Piper Sandler, and thank you for the opportunity to serve the authority. So it's about a 6-week process from sending out the request for terms to the banks to closing. Obviously, we're going down this route because of the accelerated timeline and the structuring needs specific to the authority here. We understand this is a state authority. We're going to make sure that this is a very transparent process with all the bids. And of course, we understand that there's outside approval, so everything that we recommend here is going to be vetted according to the authority's authorizing legislation here. As Jeff mentioned, we're going to keep the amount of borrowing as small as possible, but the process, you need diligence done by the banks, similar to if you wanted to buy the deal yourself, you would want to do your own diligence. So there's a lot of legal documentation. We have to make sure we comply with all the legislation. The lawyers have to talk to each other. So we're going to move this along as quickly as possible, but we also have to pay homage to the mission of the authority and the transparency of the process here. That's pretty much the key terms there. There will be additional board actions that need to be taken. So I'll leave that to the lawyers to describe to you, but we have to be meeting the parameters that you give to us and the transparency of the process, and we very much look forward to sending this out to the banks and meeting your timeline as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Herb.
Just an observation, I follow interest rates in my business, real estate business. We're not headed into a very good interest rate environment. Would that be a fair statement right now?
The 2024, from an interest rate point of view, has been extremely volatile. We as a business, we don't guess interest rates. What we do is when we are ready to do the financing and we come to you and say, do you want to do the financing? This is what the interest rates are on that day. So I'm not good at prognosticating, but I think, your sentiment of there is pressure on the interest rates market generally, I would say is accurate.
Yeah. You can see that in the Treasury market. I'm significantly concerned about inflation, I guess.
Right.
What's keeping the market. The only other question I have is your point about when we sell property, we pay off bonds, who makes the decision as to who's the bondholders, whose debt we pay off? Who makes that decision? If I own $500,000 worth, who makes the decision whether you pay me off or you pay Jasmine off?
Right. Typically what would happen is that would be it's called an early redemption, capital E, capital R, early redemption, and then the bond trustee does it at lot. They're mandated by the bond documents to do it in some lottery format. Our transaction, where we'll probably be selling it to one bank, it doesn't really matter. That bank will know that if they have an early redemption because a property was sold, some of their bonds get canceled and some of their bonds get paid off. But Mr. Nagro, to answer your question, in a typical transaction, if you were to own, in your case, whatever the amount was, that would be drawn at lot by the bond trustee, totally independent of the borrower, totally independent of the banker and things along those lines.
Thank you, because I don't have an argument with Jasmine as to how to take off first. Thank you.
Jeff or Art, would you just briefly go over the other public approvals that we need for the issuance?
Sure. As a state authority, the Office of the State Controller has an approval process when it's called a private sale, when it's not sold as a competitive, like general obligation bond. This falls into that category. So in the legislation that was passed by the state creating the authority, obviously, we have to abide by getting approval, and there's a very specific process, form, discussion that we have with the Office of the State Controller. In addition to that, the county controller has a similar type of approval. So we need to go to, I call them third parties, people outside of this room that are definitely 100% part of the process and part of the approval process. So without an approval from the county controller, without an approval from the state controller, there's absolutely nothing that we can do around this table to close without those approvals.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff or Eric? I would ask maybe Joe Scott to just give a brief overview of the kind of legal process that Joe and the Hodgson team will be doing. And then maybe Dave Riley might just want to chime in on, Dave is kind of the keeper of this debt service agreement that we will ultimately enter into to pay the principal and interest on the bond. Joe, any?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Playing off of what Jeff said, we have weekly working group meetings scheduled. And I think that's the critical factor here, given our timetable. We have experience working with the Piper team. We have experience working with Piper's counsel. We've staffed this thing internally properly. I have a partner that's going to be working with me. I have a mid-level associate that is ready to begin work on this matter. And we also have a tax partner to do the tax due diligence that Jeff was alluding to. So from a staffing standpoint, I'm very confident that we're going to be able to meet your March 1 or March 31st deadline, depending on how your timetable finalizes. With respect to roles, once the finance team from Piper gets terms, they're going to present them to you, and you're going to review them. They're going to be based in part on discussions with Kevin and Kevin's team on what the needs are, along with discussions with the county. You know, we talked about early redemption. Do we do drawdown bonds? Do we do notes? There's a number of alternatives that are being considered by the finance team, and that's frankly one of the reasons that they were selected by you. They had done a lot of creative thinking in connection with their preparation of their response to the RFP that was distributed by Dylan on your behalf. Once the term sheet is arrived at, then it's a job of the lawyers, the suits, so to speak, to prepare the documents, and we'll be working with the county and with Tom and with the Piper Council to finalize the documents, and then we approach a closing. With respect to meetings, we had talked about third-party deliverables, the Office of State Controller and the county controller. There is a need for the authority to adopt a resolution approving the financing. So nothing can be done without you putting your signature in effect on the terms of the transaction formally by resolution. And again, working with Tom, our suggestion would be that the finance committee meet to review the terms in more detail, and then be in a position, once the finance committee is comfortable, to make a recommendation to the full board, mirroring the process that you followed today with respect to your policies. So a lot of work to be done, but I think everyone is leaning forward. The group is familiar with each other. We're reaching out to the county to make sure that we get enough county oversight. And I've had some preliminary discussions with Dave. about the county attorney's office and making sure that there's proper review at all levels with respect to the documentation, but we're reasonably confident that we're going to be in a position to meet your deadline.
Joe, if you could just give the board a sense of the relative complexity of this transaction versus others that you're involved with?
Well, I'll say this, Kevin, one of the reasons I'm here this morning is that this is an unusual transaction. This is a unique deal. There's nothing else on the shelf, so to speak, with respect to this type of financing. Jeff didn't want to use the word complexity. There is frankly some complexity with respect to the structuring of the financing. How the money is going to be delivered, whether it's all at once or in installments, how the interest rate formula is going to work, addressing Mr. Nigro's issue of are we going into a difficult interest rate environment? There's ways to address that. And the Piper team is going to be looking at that. And then the early redemption. Mr. Nigro talked about who gets the early call, so to speak. You buy or you loan money, and then someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Oh, by the way, you're getting paid off early." That's typically not a pleasant situation. But by using banks, that provides the flexibility because banks are used to having money come in and having money come back. So there is a fair amount of complexity, but we're ready to move from a document standpoint. And in terms of third-party deliverables, the big one has already been delivered by the county with respect to the approval of the financing agreement. Because as Mr. Cohen and the Piper team have indicated, the AA credit of the county is a huge driver here. And the fact that we have that done is critical and important to the transaction.
Thanks. Dave, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I don't necessarily need to get into the specific details, obviously, because Joe kind of gave a nice overview, but also we haven't come up with a lot of those answers yet. In terms of my kind of workflow on this at this point, we have the working group that's been mentioned numerous times. I've also got the first meeting with the county comptroller this afternoon. Started kind of backfilling her with information, making sure that approval is taken care of, any concerns that she has, I'll bring to the table before it becomes an issue.
Thank you. All right, any questions for the?
Just going back to Piper Sandler. I think we're talking, and Joe's talking about the complexity of all this. I think a major concern to me would be that we're going to borrow enough, as little as possible, but enough to look at what happens along the way. Because if the liquidation of the real estate takes longer than our projections, then the bonds are going to hang out there longer. And we need to, in my world, you need to borrow enough money, maybe to cover that longer thing, but you don't want to borrow. So there's real hard work to look at that, making that particular decision on how much money do we borrow. Because if you get all the way half across the water and you haven't borrowed enough, we have a problem.
Right.
Okay.
No, and part of our diligence of putting the deal together is pushing back with Kevin, pushing back with staff. The $35 million, that number is locked in stone. It's all the other ones. So it's pushing back with Kevin of, is this really the appropriate amount for the maintenance? And if the answer is yes, well then for how long? And if he says X, I'm gonna say to him, well, prove it to me, or give me comfort. Or give me comfort so we can give Mr. Nigro comfort and the board comfort. So things like that. So I didn't want to, I hope I didn't oversimplify it. We're gonna look at the lowest amount. We're gonna look at the lowest amount that's 100% appropriate.
And from a legal standpoint, we may be able to insert a mechanic into the documents to provide for additional financing in the future. I'm not suggesting that is something that you might want to do, because that further adds complexity. But the whole idea here is to get everyone thinking and to provide thoughts to the finance team, including council, so that we can have mechanics in the documents to address issues in the future.
Yes, I think that was an excellent point. There are things that will come up that we don't know. Donald Rumsfeld was often quoted as the known unknowables. There are known unknowables that we will confront in going through this project. It's inevitable. So all of these things, we've got mechanisms to deal with them. But any questions from the rest of you? This is, I'm not looking to scare anybody, but I do want to give everybody the sense of gravity of what we're doing here. This is a big deal. From just generally, politically, governmentally, real estate wise, largest transaction that Judge Littlefield said he dealt with in his bankruptcy court, and of course, probably the largest project we're going to be involved in. So any other questions?
My only comment is when we go back to the audit and internal controls, which I believe are probably more important than anything else for our foundation and future. When we talk about, to Mr. Nigro's question about who gets paid first, those are all, could be, if not, right, matters of how the internal controls would dictate that. So, I think to that end, that, a lot of thought can go into that, which kind of relieves us later necessarily of having to defend something, to your point of that worry. So, I'm looking forward to really working more on these foundational aspects, because as this moves forward, and we may be the first, but we may not be the last. So I think we need to think about as a model, also, to try to figure these little things out. That'll probably make everything a little bit easier later.
To Ali's point, and I apologize in advance, we will have to schedule additional meetings before, in addition to the monthly meetings. It's going to be inevitable that we have to do that. But, again, unfortunately, none of this can be done remotely. It has to be done in person. So, hey, I do have one question, maybe for Jeff and Eric more so than Joe. We all talked about, and Joe reminded us through this transaction, that there has to be a project to be able to do a bond financing. What level of detail does this project have to be explained in the bond offering or supporting documents? Is, I know you said, you've got to be, you've got to be really diligent about, the expense side and the capitalized expenses, but the project itself, how detailed a description do we have to provide?
There's a twofold description. There's the legal description that Joe has to get comfortable with, that the project fits within state law. Right. So and he's done that, or he's doing that, and that'll occur. When we go out and tell the story to the 40 banks, we tell them the same story in a paper document. In that instance, I don't think we need to list the address of 71 parcels, but I think it'll be very, very clear from the public record, the authorizing statute, exactly what we're doing. We're doing three things. We're honoring or executing on the purchase and sale agreement. That went through the bankruptcy court. We're funding the security and maintenance, and we're funding the operations of the business. I think that level of detail, a little bit more than that, should be plenty. Because from an investor's point of view, they may say, that's all nice. What I really want to dig my teeth into is the financing agreement. That's how I'm going to get paid. And the only thing that the rest of that story affects is when I'll get paid. If I'll get paid early, if I'll get paid late, if I'll get paid on time, if the properties are sold or not. But if they'll get paid is what they and their credit folks are very focused on, and that's the nuts and bolts of the financing agreement.
So Jeff, they're not, then can we assume from that they're not as, they will not, the investors will not be as interested in how the property is redeveloped or into what the property is redeveloped?
Yeah, we haven't had any discussions yet with the potential investors. In my sense and my experience, they should have no interest in that. Because once that property is sold, they get paid back. They have their cash and they're done.
But also really the collateral they have is the backing of the county.
Absolutely,
So that's really
absolutely.
what you
I
have.
just have a question. Does the comptroller's office care about that? When you have to go through those approvals, do they care more about what the project itself looks like?
Going back to what Joe said, this is unique, this is the first of a kind. I've had conversations with the controller on very different types of projects, so I don't really know. I don't think they should, because Joe, in the conversations that we'll have with the controller's office, will point them to the state statute. It will point them to what the county undertook authorizing the financing agreement. So all the story's there. If the state or the county controller care how Kevin sells the buildings, that I don't know.
I could make one-
They often
Go ahead.
My experience with the Office of State Controller is that they're more concerned about the terms of the sale.
Yeah.
You know, the interest rate, is it market? Are the costs market? So that's been my experience.
Joe, do you mean the purchase from the debtor, or the purchase, the resale of the properties to the ultimate buyer?
A purchase from the lender.
From the lender. Do you see the controller getting involved in, for those of you who don't, Ally's involved in doing large New York State-owned institutional properties.
Yeah, in my experience, ESD does not work directly with the comptroller. We work with OGS, who works with the comptroller's office. We do have to prepare a pretty clear outline of what the project entails, and they may have questions about that, and that is often built into our approval process. These are state-owned institutions, so they're looking at it, I'm sure, from a different lens than they would here. But I was just curious to what extent, we need to prepare like a project plan, like you mentioned before, what this whole, the future of this would look like.
One thing that we've discussed on our weekly calls is a good, in my experience, an effective way of dealing with the state controller is getting ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Having a long lead time. So as soon as our financing plan gets a little bit more solidified, we've had one call, we were just hired right before New Year's. As soon as the financing plan gets a little bit more solidified, Kevin is gonna authorize me and Joe, the group, to approach on a preliminary basis, the state controller, and say this is happening. Dave's already starting that conversation later today with the county controller.
Yeah.
So that, and at the end of the day, the data, the facts, the story will be identical
Exactly.
for both of the approvals.
Yeah, for my experience, it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right,
One other question, you mentioned 20 or 30 banks will look at do you envision that there'll be several banks will buy these, or one bank will buy these? What's your?
Our preference from a simplicity point of view is one bank. But if 3 banks get together and provide a much better deal than one bank, and once again, I don't make these decisions, I run it through Kevin, he presents it to the board. But from a simplicity point of view, I use the expression, beat the clock, since we have time pressure, one bank is much easier. For the banks that we talk to, both local and on a national basis, assuming we have assuming the dollar amount that we've been analyzing, one bank buying the whole deal is not out of the question by any means.
I don't make any predictions, but in your view, is this attractive enough for one bank to take it all, or would they?
Yes, from a credit point of view, it's attractive from one bank. Where you get into issues with banks is their regulators and how much credit that can they have concentrated in a single line item and things like that. And but obviously the bigger the bank, the bigger of a chunk they can take. So I think that answers your question. So once again, although it's complex, like Joe said, the AA backing, the AA rating of the county and the county authorizing the financing agreement goes a long way. Does it get us to the finish line? No, there's other stuff, but it goes a long way.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for our bond and underwriting team? Okay, well, you'll be hearing more from Jeff and Eric and Joe and Dave as we move forward. You heard we're meeting weekly on this, and there's a real sense of urgency to try to get this done.
Not to be technical, but your statement is you're gonna have to work with Kevin and group to really make sure owning, and what is that real number? Is that gonna require public meetings or private meetings and
I don't.
negotiating what that number ends up being? And what part of the?
The board will have to approve it in, public session, but I don't know anything greater than that. Tom or Joe?
I'll defer to Joe on that. I mean, obviously, the approval is gonna come from the board at different stages, but as far as the working of the number, I think
Working of the.
they'll be able to push back, certainly, to the extent the board wants to be involved, they can be, or board members, but the staff will be working the numbers preliminarily, I would say, and then they'll bring them to the committee/board.
And it will be all done offline.
And those meetings are
Private.
private meetings, okay.
The thing that we don't want to find ourselves in is a situation where we have properties to manage and operate and no funds to do that with. We've made an assumption, this may change. We've made an assumption that we think a 3-year time frame is reasonable. I've been told that there are other campuses that have taken more time. Some campuses have been sold quicker. Dowling College down in Long Island has never been redeveloped, sits fallow. So, again, there's no real blueprint for this or standard way of doing it. So it's just been another complexity that we have to manage our way through.
Well, one good thing is if you look at the bidders, the auction there was $15 million, and that's a pretty big hunk of $40 million to think about.
Not that we would necessarily want to sell the properties to some of those bidders, but
Strike that from the.
So anything else on this? If not, I'll ask Dylan to give just a brief update on the campus real estate closing from a high level.
Sure. So, it looks like we're going to be trying to close in March. The reason for this being that there's some tax implications potentially. And as a result, we'd like to make sure that we're able to avoid having any sort of period of time where the next tax bill goes out and it's not currently owned by a tax exempt entity. So we're going to be doing our best to try to get this done very quickly. Right now, we're waiting on full title reports to be out this week. And so that will give us a heads up. And we've begun having meetings with the St. Rose officials to start putting together basically an inventory of all the different things that we need to go through. So that will also include things like personal property they still have. There's 2 gigantic rooms full of documents that we need to go through. And so there'll be a team that's meeting every week, and we'll be working with them to basically put together the forensics that need to go together to basically understand what we're purchasing. And taking a look at all the different buildings, there's 72 of them. It's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, just a point here that some people kind of get a little confused. We only bid on and were successful on buying the real estate assets. There are a whole nother set of assets that the college still owns. For example, snow removal, trucks, plows, lawnmowers, things that the college owns, and we may decide would make sense for us to buy. We may decide not. We may decide that let's contract it out to a firm. It'll be a financial decision, I think, but there is a lot of properties still in the campus. These properties, as one of the St. Rose officials mentioned to us this morning, were staged to sell. So furniture is all still in them, desks. Many of you know there's not a big market for used office furniture now. There's a little bit of a glut on the market, but there are other things. Most of the musical instruments, St. Rose had a big music program. Most of those have been sold off. There's some other assets. There's some legacy type property that there's been an interest by the county executive and a receptivity by the college to commemorate the legacy of the college in some way, shape, or form, and to the Sisters of St. Joseph de Carondelet, the founding French order of nuns who started the college. How that happens, we're not sure, but there may be some items that the original statue, for example, that the sisters put up is behind the Lally building. That may be something that we want to acquire and place somewhere in this campus as a legacy and commemorate their 100-year run of the college, and the county executive is very sympathetic to that. So all these things we'll have to go through, and we will, in our weekly meetings, we'll keep you posted. If there are any things that you think of that we should, that from whatever area, just let us know and we'll keep those. We have had inquiries from faculty, alum, and students about things like banners and signage, and the college is kind of dealing with that, but these larger things are something that we'll work with them to decide what to do with. No, we can, you can talk about that, because it is something.
Well, I think some of us, I know you're very well versed on the neighborhood, you could probably conduct a tour for us. We were thinking about getting a group of us together, and not today. It's in the near future where we can get into a van or something and drive around with probably the direction of that woman who's in charge.
Yeah.
For us to get a feel for all the properties that we are dealing with. So that will happen in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll work on that, and work around your schedules to try to do that. Maybe not all 71 properties, but the houses, maybe we'll hit a couple of those. But the larger, bigger buildings, I think it would be helpful. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I always, I'm able to think about things better with a visual point of reference. It just makes it easy for you to think about and figure out what to do. So we'll get that underway, and it's in our agreement with the college and the purchase and sale agreement to be able to do that. We do have to take out insurance rider or something like that for when we do that. But we probably also want to get an engineer or some professional service people into those buildings. Maybe not on the trip that we do, but independent of us, and try to give us some independent judgments on the condition of those buildings and their operating systems for the obvious reasons.
We might want to also follow up with Conti and just say, look, you've done a drive-by, but now we really want you to go with us and look at the part of the property.
John's referring to Jackie Conti, the appraisal group, who did some work for us on helping us construct our bid. So that's something we can certainly activate.
The other thing was we talked about possibly moving this meeting physically to one of the buildings in the future, and so that might be something.
Yeah. Yeah, the college is more than receptive to having that happen.
Okay.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I guess we're on to other business.
Yeah, there's somebody else. Oh, I have no other business.
Yeah.
Any of the members? I would, Mr. Chairman, like to request a brief executive session to discuss some issues regarding real estate, and Tom can say that if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, it will be a potential disposition of real estate, publicity of which would substantially affect the value.
I would agree with that. There's a couple of topics that we have that would not be appropriate.
Yeah, nothing for action, no, but just an update.
So we'll need a first and a second for executive session. First, second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Can I have a 5 minute break?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah, sure, absolutely.